Hi, Annette Lang here. Welcome to my podcast, The History of Personal Training, or at least my experience in it. This podcast will be a combination of my stories. Full disclosure, I might not remember things exactly the way that you did. Now, my stories of 30 plus years in the fitness industry and then specifically personal training. I was at the beginning of a lot of events, the firsts, so to speak, and so I hope you enjoy those stories. In addition, I'll be interviewing lots of different people whom I've met through the years, and I think that will help piece together a wonderful timeline of the development of this profession that we now call personal training. Enjoy. This interview is with Ian O'Dwyer. I met Ian through PT on the Net and had a great experience traveling with him in Australia, teaching some workshops. He's such a wonderful guy, really funny, and just has great stories and is a great influence in our profession. Ian O'Dwyer, enjoy. I am speaking with Ian O'Dwyer. Ian, I'm so happy that you agreed to do this with me. I think I met you through PT on the Net, if I'm not mistaken. But if it's okay with you, I would love to just hear your story, starting from the beginning of your background, how you got into fitness, personal training, what you have been doing, and what you're doing now.
And it is always a pleasure. We have shared many miles together and many conventions over the years, and it's an absolute pleasure to be able to have a conversation with you, even though we're on the other side of the world from each other. So, yeah, we did. We met through PT on the Net through a great friend of ours, Richard Boyd, and it was an interesting introduction, I suppose, when you think that, we've got people who condition, look after, mentor, guide, whatever the term may be, people around the world. And when you go from one country to another and you meet, people who have the same soul and the same love and the same passion to help people, it was just ironic, even though we spoke a different language. That was in the fact of, being Australian and New Yorker. So, but look, I've come from probably a non-traditional background. Large family. My dad was a horse breaker, so we had horses all our life, and I guess that's where I really learnt about movement, and I learnt about conditioning, because the way we conditioned and looked after our animals was much different to how we do humans. And when you go through and look after an animal, especially a horse, it's got to be, you've got to have lots of variation in their movement. You've got to have things that stimulate their brain and don't get them bored. You've got to really observe what their coat's like, whether they eat, whether they're enjoying their work. So all these skills that I was given, little did I know that in the latter years of my life that I'd probably be using humans. I grew up with a family of 8 boys and 1 girl. Of course, Dad always said that you had to have a trade, because you never know when things get tough. You've got to be able to turn your hand to something. So right. I started as a plumber and spent 19 years as a plumber. So
and Ian, sorry,
and I guess
this is in Australia, right?
In Australia,
yeah.
Correct. So I was in country Victoria. It's like the Florida as in position in Australia. It's the east coast and down the bottom. So and where I came from, it was flat, really flat. So it was dairy farm, orchards, lots of citrus fruit and that sort of stuff. Country. The summers were 40 degrees C, 110 Fahrenheit, and then about -3 in the wintertime. So, big variations. So, I had 3 plumbers in the family, 2 builders in the family. So, being in the trade was just something we knew that we could do and do reasonably well. So, growing up, sport was a huge thing for me, and that's probably my education, if you like, because as I got older, my appetite to play at the elite level in Australian rules football was just driven, because my brothers were very, very good at it. And in fact, number 7 brother was signed by a major club, and he broke his neck a week after he was signed. So,
wow.
The appetite to succeed was driven by him. And I guess was always going to be tough, because I had an artificial eye. I cut my eye at 3, so to play sport at any elite level, you've got to have all your faculties, and I was missing one of them, so it probably didn't make it the easiest trip to get to that level. But anyway, so gave it my best shot. Along the way, copped a lot of injuries, with the way we conditioned and strengthened the body, and there was impact injuries, but not nowhere near the injuries I was getting just from competing in sport. So about 1997, my mother was diagnosed with cancer in 90, and I went back, and I've got a handicapped brother, intellectually disabled brother, and so I went back to my hometown just to get things sorted, look after him and Dad, and Dad passed, Mum had passed, and Wayne was organised, and it was interesting. It was just, okay, what do I do now? So, because my passion was always the fitness industry, or my passion was being healthy,
right? And
that's when I did my diploma and got into the fitness industry. And it's quite funny and epic, because I was working in Melbourne at the time, and working on the Hilton Hotel, which is across the road from one of the most famous sporting venues in Australia called the MCG. And anyway, I'd seen this ad in the paper about PT on the net, and this guy Richard Boyd, and anyway, I rang him and contacted him, and it was kind of funny because you think about PT on the net. I mean, we're talking about 1998 when I met him.
Wow.
And the internet was basically just starting to happen. PTs never knew anything about the internet, but right. I thought it was ironic that his business was called PT on the net.
Hey, Ian, can I ask you, how, with personal training wasn't big yet there then, right? Or it was basic fitness stuff, like working in the gym? Okay.
Personal training was very non-existent, really.
Right.
So I guess for me it was more get into the health and fitness industry. I mean, my goal was to be a personal trainer, and experience of what I already experienced and worked with. I guess for me was I just wanted to get in and help people in some way, shape, or form to move better, and I didn't really understand at that time what that meant.
Right.
So I was actually thinking about moving to Melbourne, because I was still in country Victoria. I think thinking about moving back to Melbourne and actually opening up a centre where I had a pool and a small gym, because we used to condition the horses a lot in water, and I just could see who had back problems or overweight problems or whatever, how water was such a calming, powerful tool, but was often overlooked when it came to getting people to be able to do things that they once had thought they could never do again.
Right.
So I met Richard, and then 12 months later I came up to Queensland to see one of my brothers up here who was living up here, and he said, "Why don't you have a studio?" And had a look at his studio, and I think 2 months later I owned it.
That's crazy.
It is crazy, isn't it? So from a 19-year career of plumbing and playing sport, 20 years of playing sport, to all of a sudden now being a studio owner. And when I was here, when I was on the coast, I was the only studio on the coast at the time, in an area of probably 200 miles. So very different these days, and I can assure you there's right. studios and gyms on every corner. Right.
Wow. Okay, and so were you by yourself then in the studio, or?
Yeah, so I basically I moved up here with my wife and two children at the time, and the studio was it had 3 trainers in it, and Richard. So Richard was out obviously growing PT on the net,
right?
And so for me it was really I was going to take over his role, but because he was on the road so much with PT on the net, it really meant that then I had to come up here and start afresh. I had no clients, so I had 3 trainers. 2 trainers in a part-time, so in 100 square metre space, very tiny space, but it worked, and it worked really, really well, and still does. I'm back now to 1 trainer and myself, purely because of the fact that it's a nicer environment when I've got the ability to have people who train with the same philosophy, and the clients like the fact that it's very intimate, and so it's kind of lovely now. And that I haven't, I've got the ability to be able to do hands-on. I've got the ability to be able to do group.
That's
got
great.
The ability to be able to do, do one-on-one. So we've got this facility here in Noosa, and then we've got the facility in Melbourne, which is 300 square metres, and it's got an indoor running track, just a 24-metre running track, and space, which is what we love.
Oh wow. And so, okay, so then tell me, like, what your involvement with PT on the Net, PTA Global, and all of that?
That's right. Yeah, I had Richard, as I said, bought his studio. So when Richard saw what I was doing, it was very different from what other PTs were doing, from what he had seen in Melbourne and Sydney and so forth. So it was quite interesting because I stayed in contact quite heavily with Richard, obviously, after buying his business. And in 2002, he emailed me and said, "You've got to come to the States." And I went over to the very first NASM conference. So that conference was a scenario where I guess it enabled me to see what the rest of the world was doing,
right,
and how they were doing it. And it was great because that's, I got to meet Rodney Korn, I got to meet Bobby Capuccio.
Right, I think I was at that conference too.
And then I got to meet a guy called Michel Delcourt. So, it was quite funny. It was, when you sit back and look at the journey now, you met all these people in one conference, and no wonder your journey has been shaped the way it's been shaped.
Right.
So that was 2002. So from that time forward, what Richard could probably see in me was I looked at how movement was very differently from how we had been taught. So, and he could see that I was back in those days, I was using foam rollers, and foam rollers really weren't being used that much.
Oh, not at all,
so,
Ian. Yeah. Wow.
Because, and you can remember 2002, like, they were there, but really no one knew what they were doing with them,
yeah.
So, and, it was kind of funny because in my hometown, physiotherapists and that were just looking at me as if I had two heads. What the hell are you doing with a foam roller? What's this foam roller thing, So, then Richard said, "Look, whilst you're here, do you want to do a couple of workshops?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." So we just started doing some workshops for the organisations that he had contracts with PT on the Net, and right. The trainers really responded well to them. They loved the tool, they enjoyed the interaction, and I guess, Annette, just like you do, intuitively you just make the workshop so much fun, and that's a really powerful point that I think, if we spoke to anyone, any trainer, any time, we've got to make that involvement with the person in front of us enjoyable, right. Haven't we?
Right.
So 2007, then we PT on the Net was sold, and it was kind of interesting because 2008, Richard himself and Bobby and Michel was sort of talking, what do we do next? Because Michel was obviously pushing Viper, had just come on the market, and coming on the market.
Just explain what Viper is really quickly for everybody.
I missed you there, Annette, sorry.
You mentioned Michel was getting Viper on the market, so just explain what Viper is briefly.
So we had, at that stage there, Michel and Richard and myself had developed a really strong relationship, and it was quite interesting because Michel had actually worked in Noosa 12 months prior to me buying the business. So
really?
there was this interrelationship which was quite funny. So all the way through the trips going to the States and helping PT on the Net and working with PT on the Net, and Michel and I were doing road trips and doing workshops and so forth, we were evolving this tool that Michel had called Viper, and it was a rubber tool that, from the protocol models to where it is now, was just phenomenal. It was, we would spend hours just playing with it and making up exercise, and of course Michel had the brilliance and the intelligence to create this whole education around it, and because basically it was about movement, and that's why I loved moving
right.
with the tool.
Right.
So. And it was funny because when you look at it, Michel's never been a sports person, where Richard and I both were. So it was kind of funny that he developed this tool to allow you to move better, feel better, and be better, especially in sport.
Uh-huh.
And we were the ones who were actually benefiting by it, and not him, because he was the sports person. So it was quite funny.
That's great.
So it was, we stayed in contact, and I guess my vision has always been, I'm a team player, and I love playing, being involved with teams and working with people I trust and positive people. So, I guess I always envisaged, working with Richard and Michelle and Bobby and those sorts of guys purely because of the fact that they were friends. And, just like you, I mean,
Right.
I was looking at some photos the other day when we were first in Sydney. And remember, we were in Melbourne, we were running around the streets of Melbourne, showing you what was in Melbourne with the tennis centre and the MCG and Parliament House and all that sort of stuff. And
I remember Richard asked me, Annette, will you teach a movement screen workshop at a couple of places in Australia? The only thing is, and he said, we'll pay you, and we'll pay you for the expenses, but you have to sleep in the same motel room as Ian and me. And I was like, okay, what the heck? I'm going to do it. But that was so much fun.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because people don't get that. People don't understand that when you're on the road, that sometimes that's just what you got to do.
Oh my gosh, people think it's so glamorous traveling around teaching, right? I'm like, oh, you want to schlep your stuff with me? I mean, it's great, but it's not as glamorous as people think it might be.
No, it's not glamorous. It's not glamorous, and I guess that's why our relationships are so important, because as I say to my wife now, my family, my second family, but really it's my first family. All the people on the road that I work with, and because they're the people who get to hear you when you're at your highest, and also hear you when you're at your lowest, when you're missing home and not sleeping and got jet lag, and
right.
And you're trying to work things out, and some of the discussions we've had over a couple of quiet drinks have been, I'll never forget them, but they're the powerful discussions that just shape what you do and shape who you are. So I can't think. You and Michelle and Richard and Bobby and all my family enough because of the fact that I've become who I am because of the people I had at the time that I really did need good people.
Right. Yeah. So what I would like to have you talk about is PTA Global, and now what you're doing now with Thomas Myers and everything. I would love that.
Okay, so PTA Global was an idea born in 2008, and it was funny, Richard and Bobby were, because we'd had conversations and emails and so forth, and they were out one night, and they just had they were at a restaurant, and all of a sudden Richard started drawing on this tablecloth. It was a paper tablecloth, and what he envisioned that he would like to create, and PTA Global was we didn't want to have a certification in it. We actually wanted an advanced education portal so that it could just bolt on to whatever organisation that you were involved with, whether it be ACSM, whether it be whether it be NASM. That's what we wanted. We didn't want to have a certification because realistically, why would you go and reinvent the wheel?
Right.
And so our thoughts were, okay, what we'll do is we'll get 25 of the world's best, bring their education to one spot. So instead of people being confused and looking to find out who's the best for this or who's the best for that or who's got the current information for that, we could then advise them to say, listen, these guys are the ones you should be listening to because they're the ones who are really driving the industry and shaping the industry. So we got, you're included, and as I said, a heap of the other guys who were included with Myers and
right.
and Chuck Wolf and Gary Gray and Gray Cook and all those guys. It was an immense amount of people. It was fantastic. And what basically happened from there was that because of the process in the States, we were forced to put it into a certification. So that became a long process. But it was interesting because then we said, well, hang on, we need a systems guy. Well, then Rodney Coyne came into the picture, and Rodney's just an amazing guy when it comes to being able to take information and systemize it into a manner of which it can be understood, used, and really well applied.
Right.
And then Scott Hobson from he was working with PowerPlate at the time. And,
right.
I mean, Hoppo studied everything from religion through to the highest level of human biology, and it was interesting because he'd done a lot of stuff with Czech and a lot of stuff with Mark Hagen with athletes' performance back in those days, and and a whole array of people. He had a huge knowledge on sports conditioning, energy systems, and so forth. So we all had a meeting to say, well, listen, guys, are we interested? Can we do this? Do we want to do this? So in 2009, we launched PTA Global. We put a certification, but we also had a bridging course and an advanced course. And basically what the bridging course was to say, if you're already qualified, we want to bring together for you the areas of training now that have been ignored. We want to talk about behavioural change, and that's something you do brilliantly well in it. You know, the way you can talk to people,
right.
more importantly, the way you listen to people, the way you adapt any session to suit their needs on the day. So, you know, you were driving the industry at a cutting edge that no one else was seeing.
Oh, thank you.
We talked about and it's there's no need for thanks. It was the blatant truth, and you still are one of the best presenters I've ever seen in the world, because your authenticity is such that you don't do what you do, you live what you do, and that's what trainers and coaches have to understand. This for us isn't a choice of a 9-to-5 job. This for us is how we live.
Right.
And you know, how we were, I think, really blessed as a team was that we got to see people like you, and you didn't get to see people like you because you were you. So for us to travel the world and see what was out there and all of a sudden come across you, it was like, wow, that's a shining beacon. That's amazing. So it was really easy for us to appreciate your brilliance, and you probably didn't understand it at the time why you were getting such a lot of fuss made about you, but you know, as you still are a great friend, but you're just one of the most amazing people I've ever seen when it comes to working with people. But that's what we wanted to then bring to other trainers, so hence where PTA Global started talking about behavioural change and started talking about energy system development, started talking about, you know, a program design questionnaire where you go into working with a new client, and for the first 7 minutes you ask questions and you don't talk, you just listen to the answers, and you know, tick a box. At the end of the 7 minutes you have more information about a client than you can ever get in, you know, any other form of interviewing.
Right.
And it's interesting, you know, these systems have been amazingly powerful, and just recently PTA Global's been sold, and I think it's a fantastic thing, because now, you know, unfortunately, it was involved with a company that just had many projects going, and of course, it probably didn't get the focus that it needed. Where now, the new owner will certainly, you know, he's been in the industry a long, long time, and he will certainly focus on driving PTA Net and also PTA Global to the level it deserves, because there's so many gold nuggets in that advanced course and in that behavioural change and exercise course that it's incredibly powerful, and it just changes your life when it comes to coaching people.
Right. Oh, that's so nice, Ian. So do you spend most of your time at your studio now, or do you spend a lot of time traveling, teaching, or?
And it's been, as you well know, it's been an interesting journey, because you know, we've got to a stage now where, you know, we all enjoy being home, and we all enjoy
right.
You know, being around families, but you know, I still love helping people change. I still hope helping, you know, coaches get better at what they do. I still love seeing the end user walk out of a session where they're, you know, either pain free or moving better or got more vitality or just feeling emotionally happy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm still mixing it up. I'm you know, I've got 2 practices, one in Melbourne, one in Noosa, which is, you know, they're 2,000 miles apart. My business partner runs one in Melbourne, and I've got the Noosa one, and so I do spend, you know, I still probably do 20 to 25 sessions a week in Noosa,
okay.
But I still travel. I still probably do 3 or 4 trips a year. So whether that's, you know, Singapore, Asia, whether that's the US, New Zealand, wherever I guess the opportunities arise, I still like to do that, because our business is about relationships, you know, right. Whether it's a client in the studio, whether it's a client in Central Park, or whether it's, you know, you and I doing this. You know, you and I aren't doing this podcast purely because of the fact that we want to make people smarter. We're doing it because we love talking to each other and hearing about where life is, but also hearing about the journey so far, because right. That inspires us and hopefully helps us become better at who we are. So, you know, I love still creating those relationships, or maintaining those relationships more importantly, and observing how, if people follow the tools and the tips that we can give them, how it improves or enhances their quality of life, or their coaching, or their clients' outcomes.
Right, right. Oh, that's so great, Ian. Okay, I'm going to leave you with 2 questions, and I think you probably have answered them anyway, but just to recap, what do you think? Yep. What do you think a new person in our industry, you know, just one piece of advice for a new person starting in our industry, and then what would you tell somebody who doesn't know our industry? What would you tell them about us, like who we are?
So, Annette, you broke up a little bit there. So,
okay. Two questions to leave you with.
Two questions. What would be the first piece of information for a new trainer? Is that correct?
Yeah. Give advice to somebody new to our profession. What, when I was new, I wish somebody would have told me this.
Okay. Yeah, it's just a little bit breaky up here.
Okay. What does a new fitness professional need to know?
A new fitness pro for me, what do they need to know?
Yeah.
They need to know how to communicate. And I think more than anything, I was in South Africa many, many, many years ago, and we were doing this workshop, and there was a group of trainers who were at the workshop, and there must have been 60 or 70 trainers. And there was one guy who couldn't speak a word of English.
Okay.
Yet he trained consistently 40 white South Africans a week. And his business was just jumping out of the ground. And I guess what that taught me was there's many ways to communicate. And I think communication, once again, this is what you do really, really well. I think communication is everything. If a fit pro is going into a session, a new fit pro is going into a session with a client, I think what's really important is to fit that client on that day with where they're at.
Exactly right. And that's hard.
If you can do
that's
that,
hard sometimes.
It's really hard. But the one thing I've learned from you is listen when you ask a question, and you're really good at for a new fit pro. It's hard, I know, because they're thinking I've got to make this session. I've got to make this session great, and this session's got to be it's got to have intensity, but it's got to have stretching, and it's got to have some breathing time. And it's there's all this stuff going through their head. I think at the end of the day, if you can find out in your questionnaire what the client's background was, what have they done in their life that has made them happy or that they've spent a lot of time in other words, if they've played a sport, what's their goal, what's their level of fitness now, and what's their style of fitness? In other words, what do they like to do? Do they like to get really adventurous, or do they just like to be sort of doing stuff that they know, stuff that they're familiar with?
Right.
I mean, those four things are really easy because in the opening interview that you have with your client, they're the things you need to find out. If you can find those four things out, Annette, the rest is easy, because if I know how my client likes to move, in other words, if they're a traditional type person who just like, working on the machines or doing stuff that's safe in an environment of what they know, then what will happen is that you will meet your client no matter when or how they're feeling, where they need to be met. In other words, they'll feel good doing what they're doing.
Right.
If they've come in, and this is what I said before when I very first started, and it was, Dad taught me how to observe with the horses. We've got to learn to observe. So if a client comes in and they look tired, if a client comes in and they look pasty, their skin looks pasty, if a client comes in and they're not really buzzing with happiness and out of there, just wanting to go, then that's sort of telling you a few things. That's telling these guys just need some gentle stuff and let them just move a little bit and see how they improve or don't improve. Maybe they just need to lay down and do some breathing because their day's been so intense.
Right.
So I guess for a new fit pro, you just need to be able to find out those four questions initially. What's their goal? What's their style of training? How do they like to move? Have they played a lot of sport? Do they like to get crazy with their movement, or are they just people who like to be in a safe environment? What's their level? Have they done a lot of sport lately, or fitness or movement, or are they pretty sedentary or pretty bound to the desk? And what's their emotional goal? What drives them to come in and see you?
Right.
Because if you can get those four areas and then apply those four areas through listening, and then observe your client when they come in, that's all, for me, a trainer really needs to know. Because if you can get really good at that, the rest, and it will become so much easier.
Right.
And I guess the second question you asked, what should the general public know about our profession? The general public should know that it's a profession that we take really serious. It's not something that, you and I are the ones that have been in this industry a long, long time. I'm not a person with bulging muscles. Used to be, because that was what our sport required.
Right.
But as we've gone through now, we understand that this profession's probably more about wellness than it is about fitness. Because in our understanding, if we have our clients well, if our clients can have health and well-being, well, then strength and fitness and weight loss and mobility and, clarity of mind, they're all byproducts.
Right.
So for me, I think our public, our general public, needs to know that we're not about, breaking people in half with doing, crazy intensity sessions. We're about getting people to move better, feel better, and be better, not just on a physical, but on a mental and emotional state as well.
Right. That's awesome. And if you want to get your butt kicked, we can do that too.
Yeah. Yeah, you bet.
That's awesome. All right. Well, listen, I'm going to let you go, Ian, and I'm going to come back for another talk sometime, okay?
I would love to, Annette. Thank you so much for your time this morning, and take care, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in 2017.
All right, great. Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.